Gentlemen, the rumors linking Philippe Coutinho to Chelsea continue to boil, and there could be an implication in that for Christian Pulisic. This actually came up on FC last week. Here's Don Hutchison and what he had to say.
I would love to sit down with Jody Morris, who's a friend of mine, and you guys know that I'm friends with Frank as well, and say, well, why aren't you offering Christian Pulisic this sort of position? Because instead of scouring Europe for a number 10 or someone that can play on either flank, you've got one indoors. You've got one in-house already on the books at Chelsea. Invest a little bit more time in Christian Pulisic.
Craig, what do you think? Should Chelsea say, nah, Coutinho, we're good. We got Pulisic. Can he do that job?
You should have done said that, because I was on the show with him.
Well, you don't listen to Don, frankly.
Well, I don't listen to many people, frankly, as you know. Sometimes I just sort of I tune out and I'm away. Like, look.
It's not going to make getting playing time much easier, is it?
No, but that's what happens when you go to a big club, and you know he's been at one before in Dortmund, and now he's at one with potentially more clout. Maybe not a bigger club, but potentially more clout to bring players in, and that's just part of the job. Look, I know there's been a lot of talk about the young guy potentially playing as a number 10, as a playmaker as well as a wide player, and I've no doubts he could do that. But I think ultimately, Frank Lampard sees him as a wider guy. And I think at the moment, whilst Coutinho's had a tough time in the last 18 months or so, there's a reason Barcelona went all out to pay what they paid for him, because he's a quality player now. The question is, can he resurrect that form from Liverpool? Which I think he can, but I think he needs to find the right environment. So, it might come down to, listen, the one thing that might happen here is and the Coutinho name's been mentioned, Seb, but it might be, look, Lampard might say and Chelsea might say, well, yeah, we like the player, but that's a hell of a lot of money. In our budget, we've got other places. We need a centre-half. We might need a full-back. We definitely need a striker, and they don't come cheap. And so do we need another playmaker when we've got Mason Mount, when we've got Christian Pulisic, when we've got Callum Hudson-Odoi as a wide player, when we've got these other guys that are still at the club? Do we need to go out and spend whatever it is on a player like Philippe Coutinho? And the answer to that might be no. So that might be the salvation for some of these guys to step up and do a job.
Herc, what do you think? It's a pretty big compliment, whether you agree with it or not, that Pulisic could do the job you'd bring Coutinho in to do.
Yeah, but I agree with Craig. Why would you spend that money? It's a $150 million plus move that Barcelona, did for Coutinho. Why would you bring that type of player, spend that type of money in a position that maybe is not of need to you? Greg addressed, the center backs. He addressed the 9 position. I think this is what Christian has going for him. He can play that 10 position, but it doesn't have to be underneath the striker. We've seen him play it and create from the wings. He's a very good player. And I also watched this segment that Craig had, and they spoke about Christian's, I don't know if it's mentality or personality, I should say, how he's low-key, he's shy. Maybe this is going against him. And you and I had spoken about this in a few weeks ago, about Christian Pulisic being the captain for the U.S. men's national team. And I said, I don't think he has that personality. This is another example. I want to see Christian Pulisic, because I see him right now going down that Landon Donovan route of that shy kid.
It sounds like you mean that in a bad way. It doesn't sound like you mean that in a good way.
It's not a positive. He's a very good player. But he doesn't feel comfortable under that limelight. He doesn't feel comfortable with that responsibility. And I feel if he had that chip on his shoulder, like Clint Dempsey has had, like other players have had, his development could be even better. His star could be even brighter. He's such a good, talented player. And Craig can tell you about what it takes to play in the Premier League. Sometimes you need that bravado, because I don't think it's all physicality. I think he's proven physically he can handle it. I think he needs that bravado about him, and sometimes he needs to speak up. And maybe it's about going to Frank and say, I want this responsibility. Don't go out and spend this money. Give it to me. Give me the responsibility.
Herc, you mentioned what Don Hutchison said. It's actually about shyness, and since we know Craig wasn't paying attention, we'll play that clip again for him here.
I hear from the grapevine that he's a little bit shy and a little bit quiet, so maybe it's a chance for Jody and for Frank to try and coax that out of him and make him a team player and make him more demanding on the pitch. Because if you are quiet in training, you are quite shy, you're then not going to give your best. That's just inevitable. So I'd like to know the reasons why, if Chelsea do go for Philippe Coutinho, I can't imagine Christian Pulisic staying around forever.
Craig, I know you hear this because every time Don's on FC, he mentions he's good friends with Frank Lampard. So we know that's coming from a very good grapevine. What do you make of what Don says here about the shyness of Christian Pulisic?
My best friend, Frank. I disagree. Listen. I can't comment on the shyness if that's coming from internally, and he's a quiet boy. But I disagree that affects you giving your best day in, day out. Because I've worked with a lot of guys who are screamers and shouters. I've worked with a lot of guys who are quiet. But ultimately, a quiet guy can get on with his business the same as anybody else. Look, the issue here for me is, as a player goes through his career and then makes a step up and piles the pressure on, he's asking himself questions, right? When Christian Pulisic left Dortmund, where he wasn't getting some game time at the end, or certainly not as much as he was a year or so earlier, because of Sancho and because of Brun Larsen, he makes the move to Chelsea. He knew it was coming. It was pre-done. So he's putting himself out there. So he's confident in himself that he's going to be good enough to get the job done. Now, it's sink or swim. We're in the big boys' pool now. You know, we're in the Premier League or the Bundesliga or La Liga or Serie A. There is no room for sentiment. There is no room for, well, how's the American public going to feel about this if he's not playing? Nobody cares. Nobody cares. And the American public should stop worrying, or American soccer fans should stop worrying about whoever's going to sign for Chelsea. Because either Christian Pulisic, like every other player, is going to be good enough. He's going to be good enough to hold down a place in the team no matter who they sign, or he's not. And it's as simple as that, really. And, you know, you shouldn't, as a player, worry about who is going to be coming in, because you want better players to be coming in, Seb. Because I think when you play with better players, you play better yourself. And if you're not playing, it's because you haven't shown you're good enough or doing enough to get game time. It's part and parcel of the job. And I don't think the young man will be worried about who Chelsea are going to be bringing in. I think he'll be purely focused on, whenever the season restarts or the next season starts, of showing Frank Lampard on a consistent basis the glimpses of what we saw in the last 6 months or so, which were pretty good.
I'll go ahead, Herc.
I was just going to say, if you're worrying about who comes in at a club like Chelsea, you're going to do a whole lot of worrying, because that's a huge platform, and that's a team that it's always going to have targets linked up with you in your position, and probably 3 or 4 at a time.
So let me ask you both, just straight up. If Coutinho comes, Herc, I'll start with you. Should Pulisic stay?
Yes. I don't want to see the easy way out when we talk about things. I want to see him figure this out. I want to see him puff that chest out, the bravado. I want to see him win and earn his spot.
Craig?
Absolutely, because the likelihood is, even if they sign Coutinho, and I think that's a stretch, is he'll play in the playmaker role. He'll play in some sort of middle of the park, you know, in front of a Jorginho or a Kante. And ultimately, I think Lampard sees Pulisic as a wider guy in the left or the right. And I think, you know, he'll be battling with the Hudson-Odois and people like that for places in the team. So absolutely, it's a squad game. And I don't think for a minute Chelsea will be looking to get rid of Christian Pulisic. And I don't think he'll be looking to leave. He'll be looking to knuckle down no matter who comes in and show what he can do. That's what I think that's what he's going to do going forward.
For the moment then, Christian Pulisic, one of many options for Don Hutchison's close friend, Frank Lampard.
Thanks so much for watching ESPN on YouTube. And for more sports highlights and analysis, be sure to download the ESPN app. And for premium content and live streaming, subscribe to ESPN Plus.